Awesome. So, welcome. Thank you so much for being on the show. This is amazing. I'm so excited to have you here.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so I would love if you could talk maybe a little bit about yourself to get started. I think a lot of people, especially for our podcast, we do a ton of different genres. So maybe to get yourself out there a little bit more, we would love for our viewers and listeners to know a little bit more about you and pick up your book in stores because we definitely loved it and enjoyed it so much. So if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, I've always been a lover of romance books. My gosh, I think I was like 15 when a friend gave me a book and I was like, I'm addicted already. So I have been a long time lover of reading romance. And even though life has gotten busy, it's like I'd always have a book kind of in the shelf or, just in the closet type thing. And I kept coming back to it. And I don't know when or why I started writing, but I think I just got to the point I was like, I think I want to give this a try.
Yeah.
So I did. So I actually didn't start writing until I was in my 30s. And I had had my first child. And I just needed kind of something else besides, changing diapers and that kind of stuff. So
I
I
agree.
started and I knew nothing about dialogue. I knew nothing about plot. I knew nothing about character development. It was just me at like 3 a.m. with my coffee while my infant was sleeping, and I just started writing. So that's kind of how I started writing. I certainly didn't go to school for writing or, go to a creative writing institute or anything like that. I just kind of took my own classes along the way and picked it up where I could.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you got to where you were because
Yeah.
I loved your writing. This was such a good book, and for everybody to see the cover,
Oh,
Trading
thank you.
Places, this was
Yeah.
amazing. I loved it to death. So getting right into it, I'm very excited to get these answers from you and pull
Yeah.
them out of you.
Let's do
Um,
it.
so I just loved I read contemporary romance genres all the time, and I feel like they can definitely get into that same kind of habit, kinda like a Hallmark, you see the same thing, but I
Yeah.
never have seen a book like this where people
Oh.
trade 2 different places and coming from different parts of the town. So what kind of inspired you to write this kind of plot and, have this trading places kind of, genre into it?
So I love comedies from the 80s. And this book was actually, to give a little bit of background, it started out as she was a princess and he was a mechanic. And it just wasn't working. It was like I kept going through these different plots, and finally I got so frustrated. I was like, forget it, not doing this book. And then about 2 years later, I had been watching Trading Places, and it was like a total light bulb moment of that book that was in the drawer. I was like, oh my God, they need to trade places. This is like the plot like I've needed for this story. So the movie really inspired me, but it also really challenged me to make it new and fresh and modern and a take on it. And I will say, I'm a comedy lover myself, and there is nothing that irritates me more is when I call it the slide, when it gets very serious. Like there's a very serious slide. So if I'm watching a movie and the first 45 minutes are hilarious, and then all of a sudden it reaches this point where it's not funny anymore, I really, as a viewer, I'm like, no, like, what are you doing? So with this book, I tried to do my best not to have that slide in there, and try to keep it as upbeat as possible. Obviously, there were some, serious points along the way, but that's what I really tried to go for with this.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because I did feel,
Yeah.
some people in their books definitely has that plateau of like
Yeah.
very serious. It's the dark times, and I felt very light and airy throughout this whole book,
Yeah.
which I don't think you see quite a lot. So it was nice to have that.
Yeah, that was
Um,
very intentional on my part as a reader and just a viewer
yeah,
and lover of comedy. That was absolutely intentional.
I loved that.
Yeah.
So how did you develop the characters of Lexi and Evan? I loved Evan. I thought he was great. There was a moment halfway through where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I wanna hit him," but I just loved him so much. How did you actually develop those characters?
So I had a big light bulb moment when I was working on this book in that they are both very much alike. And it took me a little bit to figure that out about them. Lexi has probably been my biggest complaint, I guess. She is very hard to like in the beginning. But with her character, I wanted to make her unlikable so that her character arc could make her likable. Another frustration with mine in romance is just the heroine is perfect right from the start. She really doesn't have a whole lot of room to go. So I took a risk with Lexi and just tried to make her a little unbearable. Also, so that Evan couldn't really stand her in the beginning. If he really likes something about her in the beginning, it's kind of a foregone conclusion. They're not going to have to work for it. So I wanted to give him somebody that was going to challenge him a lot. So when we're talking about character arcs, I'm a very visual person. So I saw Lexi's character making this beautiful arc, starting at the bottom, going all the way to the other side. With Evan, I saw him, he's who we're kind of rooting for in the beginning. He's going up the arc and then he slides back down.
Yep.
And that probably makes sense now that you've read the book.
Oh, yeah.
So I developed them to be they are very similar in how they approach things. They just don't realize that about each other. So that's why I think they kind of butt heads quite a bit, is that he needs to be someone who is strong enough to handle her, and she needs to be strong enough to handle him. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was definitely that part where I was like, I definitely want to hit him, but
Yeah.
he was such a good character. I really loved both of them connecting and again,
Yeah.
changing for each other, I think,
Yeah.
and not just for each other, but realizing that they should be changing just for themselves as well. I thought that was a
Right.
really interesting
Right.
way.
Right.
Um, and talking about characters, I
Yeah.
absolutely love Cece. She was so adorable, and I've met my few CCs in the world, so it was just nice to connect to that. But I loved her story of being intertwined throughout this of you have the meat and potatoes, but she was definitely that main side
Yeah.
dish where you're like, I
Oh.
want more of her. But how did you think of her ending after the book, with her biological father now coming into play?
So it's funny because I was just at a book event and they were asking, like, is there going to be a sequel? And what I keep coming back to is I don't think Cece's story is done, and I don't think Craig's story is done. I think there is definitely room to explore what Evan and Lexi's world looks like, kind of letting go of Cece and watching her with this new family and with her dad. I think there's something there. It's not fully fleshed out yet, but Evan has a brother and he just doesn't have a storyline yet for a sequel. But I keep coming back to like the readers want a little more closure with Cece and maybe to see her kind of struggle in this new world a little bit. So
Yeah,
yeah, there's room
definitely.
there for that. But her story I don't feel like is over.
That's fantastic to
Yeah.
hear. And you did bring up, Alec, his brother.
Yeah.
I loved the little part where Tia and him had their little thing at the end. Do you think maybe there would be a sequel not from Lexi and Evan's side, but from their point of view?
I think there is. I think for me, it has to be the right story. So I'm not going to rush it just to get it out there. But I do think there are plenty of characters, including Alec, that have, they do have a story to tell. And I think he definitely has a romance to tell.
Oh,
He's
yeah.
he's not wallpaper. you know?
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, even having his story, because he's already intertwined with Evan and with Cece, I thought that'd be cool to look into their life
Yeah.
through
Yeah.
Alex's story through it. So that'd be really cool.
Yeah. So part of
Um,
the issue with like the characters of all these side characters is it was actually quite a challenge to show Lexi and Evan doing so many things in these like opposite roles that it wasn't that the side character stories got pushed aside. There just wasn't room for them. I had to really focus on Lexi and Evan. And if Lexi does something, then what is Evan going to do in that same situation? So that really just took up a bulk of the book.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I loved it.
Oh,
I loved especially the heated more parts of the ending of the fights and the arguments. They
yeah.
always had that, but I think, it definitely got more real towards the end.
Yeah.
Was there any hard parts or scenes like that were maybe difficult to write because you just didn't want to, make them push away from each other too much where you couldn't really get them back together?
Yeah. So the scene on the yacht at the end, that was actually difficult for me to write because they they could have just hated each other so much at that point that I really had to actually back down and make it so they could come back to each other in the end. But it was hard to write because the way I had it originally, they never would have spoken again. So, the editor was like, let's back this up a little bit. Let's, make this a little bit nicer. But I think because you just feel the tension between them, that in the real world, they would completely walk away at that point. They would be so frustrated.
Oh,
So,
yeah. And
yeah.
if they did have that moment where they feel like they couldn't have gotten back together, do you think there would have ever been a chance that Evan not changing for the better and continuing on this kind of war path to being this, richy rich guy? Do you think he would have went with Elena?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. If he wanted readers to hate him, yes, he would have ended up with Helena. But
Yeah.
no, I think he liked Lexi. I think he was, she was it for him. But yeah, you just didn't know where that was going to go.
Yeah, there was a moment where I'm like, she's gonna catch them
Right.
doing
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
So it was always like the suspense of like something's gonna happen to mess this
Right.
up. So,
Right. Right.
um, so I was actually wondering while I was reading this, I was like, there's absolutely no way if I was in Lexi's situation that I could ever take on this bet. Do you think you'd be able to get through it? And why if you couldn't, if you would quit?
I don't think I could do it. I think going from her life to something else, I think I could learn a few things, but I think to stick it out for 8 weeks, I would probably be bawling the whole time. I think like anyone in Lexi's shoes, I would feel like I want things to be easy and I like my comforts, like I like my skin cream and I like,
Yep.
nice clothes and that kind of thing. I think it would be really hard even from that level of just feeling comfortable in my own skin. I don't think I would last.
I was definitely telling my friend, she met you at the, Fry's Brewing,
Oh yes,
meet and
yes.
greet, and I was like, "I just don't think I could get oil from, being a mechanic on my
Oh
hands
no,
if I had to trade places. I would just be
no,
done.
no.
I'd quit the first day."
That is because that stuff never comes off.
Yeah, no, it does not. So being local to, like having it local to Alexandria, I loved that piece of it. I think when there are books that are local to where you are, it's easier to put in a mind, where things are located and, the roads, how they should look. Did you ever do some scouting to see for like envisioning, Bailey's and the yacht club or the country club and all those places? Did you scout any other places or houses in Alexandria to think about it?
So yeah, so I scouted a bit. I just drove around Alexandria actually. I also drove around Potomac and Northwest DC, which would have been amazing candidates to be a setting for this story. But Alexandria just felt a little more personal to me. I don't know, it just felt I wanted somewhere that had like a really like fun downtown. That's just easier for me to describe in a book. Kind of old money, historic homes, that kind of thing, expensive condos, the waterfront. I wanted all that. So I just thought when I was driving through, I was like, this is it. This is where it is.
Yeah, I'm glad
Yeah.
you had something local like that because it was just so cool to I've, been to Alexandria and my sister worked near there, so it was like it's easier to think about it when you know
Yeah.
the place. So that was really cool to have that setting.
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to bring up Bowser the cat.
Oh yes.
I loved the cat. I think
Me
it was
too.
just like the perfect little extra side character to make a situation better or worse. In her case, got a little bit worse at one point.
Yes.
Um, but having it named Bowser and having Evan a fan of Super Mario Bros. Were you ever a fan and did you ever play?
I am an original Super Mario lover. I love the game. I played it in the 90s. Me and my brother would stay up just literally all night on Friday night playing it, trying to beat it. Um, the new Mario that my kids have, in my opinion, is nowhere near as good as the original. So once in a while, I do get out the original and I play it just to show them, like, this is Bowser, this is the castle, all that stuff. So yes, I was absolutely a fan, and that was part of me as a writer inserting myself in the story. Like if I'm going to write this story, I'm going to have it my way, and I'm going to include something I love in there. So yeah,
Oh, yeah, and
yeah.
including yourself into these characters, what qualities from, like, Evan and, Lexi were kinda your qualities or from, other people around you, family members or friends?
So it was funny at the brunch, I was talking about this. Lexi's character, I feel like resonates with all of us in some way in that we've all done something to not make a great first impression, and we've all met people that we don't really connect with at first. So I was just looking at the people in my life that, hey, there wasn't an immediate connection with them, or maybe people were a little standoffish, or maybe I had been standoffish. And I just wanted to draw some of that out, that some of that just realism of how we are as people. We don't always make the best first impressions. And then with Evan, just his humor and his gruffness. I mean, just people in my life. I feel like some men I know are just, they can be that way. And
Yes.
it comes across as very gruff, but there's a big heart under there. And so I kind of imagined him like, okay, he's not getting any of his 20s that he wants, and he has to raise his niece. Like, it's okay for him to be a little pissed off about life. Like, that's okay. It's totally fine.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
with Evan, I loved the part of you saying, he had a big heart underneath all that tough, macho man. Especially because in a lot of books that I've read, it's always like if it was Lexi's character in another book, they're going to make fun of her, they're gonna laugh at her
Yeah.
about simple things like not being able to do the laundry or know how to mow
Right.
the yard. And I just felt like it was so heartwarming that not only did he show her, but he didn't really make fun of her when he did it.
Yeah.
And, does that relate from any male in your life too? Like of somebody like a friend that doesn't make fun of you and just gets you there and, we're fine and everything's good.
So it's funny. I would probably say my husband. When he met me, I was pretty much like, didn't really like washing dishes, that kind of stuff. Like, cooking has never been something I enjoy. So once in a while, he'll get I call it the Evan attitude out, and he'll be like, all right, look, this is how boil pasta. Like, this is what you
Yeah.
do, like when we first met. So he was kind of that inspiration. Evan's certainly not all of him, but I think just people in your life that aren't afraid to say, like, look, this is how you do something. It's okay that you don't know, you know?
Yeah. I
Yeah.
I loved that.
Yeah.
And, being a writer and yourself saying, you kind of started writing later in life. Do you have any advice for anybody who is a writer? Like I'm trying to write my own contemporary romance and it's
Oh,
it's going very, how a normal
I love that.
kind of person would go. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like you never know if it's good enough and your biggest critique, but even to younger writers or your younger self when you started writing, what would you kind of give advice for?
I think you just have to be patient with yourself in writing and knowing that when you see a book on the shelf, it has gone through several rounds of editing. It's gone through everybody and their brother has looked at it. So writers don't often see what a first draft looks like or even a fifth draft looks like. So you really just have to try out your own style and your own voice and kind of trust that and just be patient that you'll get there. I didn't know anything about writing when I started. And the other thing I would say is you really have to be committed to making your own path. I went to writers' conferences, I connected with other writers. You have to be willing to put in the work. It's not going to be, I'm going to hand my manuscript over to the first person and they're going to accept it. And unfortunately, I get questions a lot about that. And it's like, no, like you have to put in the work. There's nothing, you can't skip ahead. And that is really not easy for some writers to hear because they see someone like Emily Henry, they think, oh, she just made it overnight.
Yeah.
They forget that I think Emily Henry had a couple of maybe YA books out. I'm not sure. She had done some prior publishing. This was her first big hit, but it doesn't happen overnight. And you really have to put in the work and the time. It could take years. It took me 10 years to get, trading places on the shelf. I wrote a lot of different things. I did like Wattpad, I did Radish, I did some self-publishing. I did all those things, but the reader doesn't see that necessarily.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
with your book now, did you have any say in the design of the cover? And any colors that you wanted? Like, how does the design process go, and did you have a more of a bigger say with that?
So the design process, I got to fill out a form, and it was like, what do you like? What do you not like? That kind of thing. What colors do you see for this? And I just literally put like bright colors. Like, I'm like, I just want it fun. I want it loud. That was it. So I didn't really have much in terms of the design, just this is kind of what the story is about and what do the characters look like.
I like that, that's cool.
Yeah,
I didn't
yeah.
actually think about that. You always think either you have no say or you have all the say. So, from a normal person, it's
Yeah,
cool to actually hear that.
yeah.
And with writing, if you weren't a contemporary romance writer, is there any genre that we could see in the future of you kind of testing the waters with?
So the funny thing is, I actually started writing my first book, which was literally like 30 pages and going nowhere, was a young A fantasy book. But I haven't
Ooh.
revisited that in like, I don't know, it's been like 15 years. But I love fantasy. I don't know that I could ever write it. It would kind of be like a dream of mine to write it, but it would be a really hard beast to tackle with just like world building and all that. So I don't know. I don't know if I
Yeah.
could do it, but I would love to.
Hey,
Yeah.
I would love to see a fantasy novel out of you. That'd be
Right.
really cool. I would love to see that.
Oh.
Yeah. So, okay, so I guess when you are writing your book and researching and trying to develop these characters, are there any books that you read that kind of inspired certain aspects in your book? Whether it's from the same kind of genre or from different ones completely.
So I've always been a huge K.A. Tucker fan. I don't know if you're
Okay,
familiar with
yeah,
her. I always love her heroes. I feel like they kind of just strike me. I just love them. I do like Tessa Bailey's humor in her books, very lighthearted. And I've read, I think, all of Samantha Young's books. Those are probably like three writers that I go back to and kind of reread again and again for
that's cool.
inspiration.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
I would say, mine would be like yourself, Emily Henry, like those, kind of lighthearted, will have that little bit of a fall, but very lighthearted in the
Yeah.
sense of everything else. So
Yeah.
I did really love that.
Yeah.
Um, and with Alec and Tia, going back to them,
Oh
do
yeah.
you think that they would be endgame and that there would be something from that? Because I know there was Josh and also Brandon that put in
Yeah.
their, 2 cents and had their, little anonymous gifts.
Yeah.
So would you think she would pick one of them or none of them?
I think she would pick one of them. If it's not going to be Alec, I think maybe there could be a happy medium there. I just don't know with Alec, maybe what his storyline would be and how Tia would fit into that. So the only thing I would be worried about is trying to write a book about him and then, maybe she doesn't quite fit, or maybe she does. I just don't know how yet. But I think that she would deserve a happy ending like anybody else. So if
Agreed.
it's not him, it could be someone else.
Hey, I think it would be really funny to see them all get together and just, if
Yeah,
if they couldn't, if not one of them could have her, all of them could technically have her. I
right.
think that'd be fun.
The very end
That
of book three, you'll get your answer.
perfect. And these scenes that are just cute and lighthearted, like, I really loved the second bet within the book of Lexi taking the tires and falling in at the end. And did you kind of want to have more, of those kinds of random things from her to, kinda conquer over it? That I mean, she was a brilliant pool player and was beating
Yeah.
everybody in the bar. Did you kinda think you wanted that out of her and kind of, conquer the odds early on, or was it kinda like something she just had to do to get through?
I think the latter. I think she definitely needed to go through some growing pains to to get to
Yeah.
just appreciate what she had and that sort of thing. And I will say, after I wrote the book, it was like a million and one new scenes flooded me. I was like, oh, I should have put that in. I could have done that. But the tire scene was kind of actually a last minute ad. It just the scene that it originally wasn't working. And so I was like, what is something just very basic that would go on? Like if I had to throw tires into a dumpster, like absolutely something would happen.
Oh yeah.
So, yeah.
I thought that was so fun. I was like, of course she would fall into it after,
Yes.
it was
Yes.
all done. And for Lexi's story after Trading Places, I mean, she was already getting involved with the foundation and stuff like that, and also getting
Yeah.
involved with, still with the Bailey shop and doing all those kinds of events. Do you think in her future she would still be pretty involved with Bailey's and even, you know, not kind of going, okay, I did my bit, I'm done?
Right. No, I think that would be the challenge for her is to keep that up, right? And
Yeah.
to, she's just, it's almost like her story was just beginning at the end of like, what is she going to do with this newfound, discovery of, I like helping people and I want to try things on my own. Is she going to just go into that or is she going to fall back into her usual pattern? My hope would be that she would just keep trying and, we would see maybe Alexi that's actually very good at stuff and finding her confidence in her voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I loved seeing that she was proud and,
Yeah.
she was proud to get the paychecks and, when Alec asked for her help, she was excited to hear
Yeah.
about, being able to be more involved. So, it's
Right.
kind of interesting to see her in the
Yeah.
future and see what she could do. So,
I mean,
um,
I think with any book, I don't know how you feel. My favorite characters are the ones that just show a capacity for change. And I'm
yes.
always like, I think that's why I'm always rooting for the villain just a little bit, because I see that maybe they have a capacity for change. And so that's really what drives, and honestly drives a lot of my writing and my characters. It's just I want that moment where they change and we see that.
And speaking of villains,
Yes.
Hudson. He was the villain to Evan. So do you think he might have, even if you don't write about it, do you think
Yeah.
he might have a redeeming quality in him for future and maybe his, romance in the future for others?
I think Hudson isn't thinking about if he has a redeeming quality. I think, I mean, I think he has a chance to show maybe something sweet could be where he actually maybe takes an interest in Cece as his niece, and maybe tries to do the right thing with her.
Yeah,
I think that could be
definitely.
that could have some merit, I think.
Yeah, I think I really liked him kind of trying to apologize. I think he did it for sometimes the wrong reason.
Yeah,
But I did and then of course always, blurting out what, he gave to Lexi at the
right.
worst inopportune times.
Of course.
Um, but yeah, I definitely think I would love to see, Craig and him kind of be there for Cece more in the future. I think
Yeah,
that'd be really cool to see and just
yeah,
see her grow into her own woman. Um, and maybe she'd be able to kind of get the best of both worlds of,
yeah.
not being spoiled, but definitely being treated
Right,
well and getting what she needs, like new shoes or new clothes or
right,
whatever. So,
right.
um,
Mhm.
do you see any of the parental, relationships getting better with Lexi and, her mom wasn't in the picture and her dad kind of had that redeeming quality at the end? Do you see something in the future for her that will actually be better for her?
So, I mean, I think so many of their issues and just people in general is just talking to one another. And I think at the end, you realize they just haven't talked. They've
Yeah.
just been letting it build for this entire time. And all they needed to say was, I'm here, I'm listening. And that's really what Lexi needed to hear throughout her whole life. So at the end, the dad just, it's like he finally said that. And I think there's definitely a place for them to have a good relationship. I think they just like I said, her story was just kind of starting there, even with her dad, but it ended
Yeah.
on a good note.
I definitely liked that. I thought that was one thing that I was like, I do hope, halfway through that, something redeeming came out of her father to
Yeah.
kind of close the book a little bit.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So, yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been fantastic. Is there any other things that we can see from you in the future if it doesn't pertain to Trading Places and a sequel for that?
Yeah. So I'm working on a new book and hopefully I will find a home for that. Um, So yeah, until I have news about that, that's about it. But I am working on some new stuff, and I've also been thinking of delving into some YA stuff maybe in the near future. I tend to write, speaking of advice, I just tend to write what I'm feeling in the moment and not get caught up in like, this is what I have to write to be a writer. But I think it's important you keep your options open when you're a writer, as just exploring genres that you might
Yeah.
connect with.
That's awesome. And, I really appreciate you, coming out tonight and, doing this with
Oh,
us. This has
absolutely.
been fantastic. And, I hope everybody out there, definitely when they see your book picks it up. We go over so many different genres. And so it's so nice to, have an you on here and get to see your book and hear a little bit more about it and actually not judge the book by the cover but actually
Yeah.
by the contents this time. So
Yeah.
this was fantastic, and thank you so much again for being on here, and we hope to
Anytime.
have you back on for the
Yes.
future project.
Absolutely.
That would be
Yes.
amazing. So, thank you again so much for being
Thank
on here.
you. This
I
has
really
been fun.
appreciate it. Thanks, and we'll see you
Thanks.
next time and hopefully at, future book events. I would love to see you there again.
Yes, definitely. All
Awesome.
right. Thank you. All
Thank you. Have a good one.
right. Bye.
Bye.